In this tutorial, we're going to look at how do you place objects in the game, right? So we're going to keep this pretty simple. It's going to be just a square object that I can click on and cycle through some images, right? So it's pretty simple. The first thing I did is I made my game scene, my menu scene, and I'm going to, like I said, keep this pretty simple. I'm just going to start, and I have a game manager. Oops. I have a game manager, if I can put it back. And in the game manager, I'm just going to keep track of the level and the number, let's say the number of mines. I don't know if that's going to be significant, but I'm just going to hard code this, right? So I'm not going to play around with any buttons or anything like that or sliders. Just going to hard code this. So I showed you how to work a menu system in a previous tutorial. So we're going to skip that part. So when you click the button, you're going to go to the level generation game scene. So I think that's already working. And if I click the button, it'll take me to the game scene. Okay, so the first thing is you need to make an object. So in this case, we're going to keep it a pretty simple object. We're going to make it a sprite. So I'm going to make a square sprite, right? And it'll be square. And I'm going to call that block. And so that's a sprite, just an image. If you look at it, it's a sprite 2D, it's an image. I want to make it into a prefab. A sprite is something, an image that you can place on an object, right? So I'm going to drag this out, and you see what it does automatically. It makes it into a game object, right? Look, it looks different, right? And then the sprite is placed on the game object. If you remove this, then you have a game object, but you have no image. Okay, I'm going to make this into a prefab. So I'm going to drag this back in here, and I'm going to call this block prefab. So that's like a symbol or a template. So, and the reason you want to do this is because if you have multiple instances of this, so let's say I go and I drag a few of them out, and I have, they're all, so you see they're all a part of this prefab. So if I decide to, let's say, change the size or change the color or something like that, right? And I go and I change the color. Okay, this one changed, right? Which is great. But if I say apply, it'll apply to all of them. So it's like a template. So this is the way we want to go. We want to work with this, right? So the other thing we want to do, I'm going to get rid of a few of these, just keep one, is the prefab. I want some code on this. So I have some block code because we want to do something with this, right? Usually you want to do something, so it's got to have some properties. So what's on the block code? On the block code, I made a new class. I want this to keep track of its position. It's going to be a grid. And I also, like I told you, I want to change the sprites, right? I want to change the color of these later. So I'm going to keep track of a sprite renderer. Remember, this is on an object, so I know it's got a sprite renderer. And I have in the beginning, I want to set or initialize the sprite renderer to whatever object it's on. So what this will do is it'll go to the object and we'll get that. This code will go and get the sprite, a reference to this, right? So I don't have to keep retrieving it. I have a reference to it throughout. The other thing is I have initialized the block. So if you give me the row, column, and the sprite, I'll initialize those. But I'm using getters and setters over here, right? So this is a getter and setter in C#. So when you use the uppercase, I'm using the getter and setter, as you can see, right? So when I say row equals row, now I do have access to the global one, to instance, right? I could say this row, and and then I directly go to the field, this field, right? But I rather use the getter instead of in case I want to do some checking, or it's just better to start off with that. Okay, so now we have our block, and like I said, we're going to just generate some colors, right? Oops. Okay, so what's going to take care of, so when when I click on the level, I want to go to a level and I need a level manager. So the level manager is going to take care of all my, well, whatever I want to do on that level, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my game scene, and I'm going to add a level manager. So create empty, and this is my level manager. The spacing here really doesn't matter, so you could space it out nicely. Here's the level manager. Of course, in the code, it does make a difference, and it looks like I made a mistake here. I put a space in the code, so let me get rid of that. Level manager, and I have to change that over here. Okay, here looks good. Okay. Oh. So here's my level manager. Let's see if everything works right. If I drag it out, okay. So there's the code. So when you load the game scene, this level manager will, whatever code you put on it, will execute. Okay. So what do we want to do? Well, the first thing is I need to make it private. I need to have those variables from the controller so I could use them to generate my game. So remember, it was I keep on saying controller, but game manager, controller, same thing. So I really need these two. Now, the reason the game manager has this is because it's coming from the menu. Uh, so it's keeping track of whatever changes you have. But then I need it here too. So I guess I'll just remove it like this. So I need it here. So the first thing is, well, how do I get these values from the game manager? Well, I'm just going to go to the game manager and get them, right? So I'm going to say mines. Now this is my instance variables equals game manager instance mines. Do I have that public, right? If it's public, yeah, then I can access it. So what I do is I go to the game manager, I get the instance, and I'm able to get those values. So whatever values there were, and the last thing was the level and game manager instance level. So I should be able to get those values, and now I have all the information I need. Let's say I have, by the way, I think in the game manager I'll just set these values. Let's say mines, let's say 5, and level. Level means how many, grid. How many in the grid? So let's say I want 8 in the grid. Okay, so then I need to set up the level. So init level, and I'm going to do this over here. Private void init level. So this is where we're going to do all our work. I also need that game object, right? Public game object prefab. So this will be my block prefab. So I need that so I can use it as a template and make many of them. So I'm just going to print these out to make sure that I'm getting them. So I'm going to say debug log, and I'm going to say mines and plus mine, just to make sure I'm getting plus, what is this one, level? Hold on, this one should be level. Let me let's see, mines. So init level, I don't have yet. Do I have it? Did I write it? Yeah. Okay, there's nothing in there yet, but should be causing no error. So let's see if this is working. I'm going to go back to the menu scene and run this and see in the console if I'm getting a printout. And it doesn't say anything. Oh, okay. Okay, I had some naming problems here, but I got it all fixed. So I'm going to run the game, and it seems like I have to change the numbers over here. So I'm going to say 6 mines, level 8, and I'm going to click start. And as you see in the level, it did print out, so that I am getting that information. So here, how we're going to set up the level. I need, like I said, the prefab. I got my values here. I'm going to save the grid. So I know on every prefab there's a script here. So I'm going to save the script where the script is. And I'm going to do some positioning here. So I have an X and Y offset. This is where the grid starts. I have a scale for the sprite if I want to change that. I also have a gap between them. In this case, I just hard-coded the mines and levels, so I don't have to mess around with any values here. Okay, so in the init level, first I would have a holder, a block holder, and that helps me organize all my blocks. So if I run the game, you'll see they're all together instead of like all over the place. So if you look over here, you see the block holder, they're all in here. So that keeps them, instead of having them all over the place. It's nice and neat. Okay, so I instantiate my grid with the level, right? And then I do my loop through the rows and columns. This is what makes the actual block on the scene. It's called instantiate. I'm using my template. I'm using the positioning here. The positioning will be based on, of course, the row and column, right? And I have a gap scale too, right? And then I place each block in its parent. I give each game object a name, so that's really nice. If I run this, you'll see they'll have a name to see. So block 01, 02. If you didn't do that, they'll all be called something, generic. Okay, and then I get the block component from each prefab because I know it has the script. If you look at it, see here's the block component. There's a script, so I want to get that script. And once I have the script, I'm going to put it in the position in the grid. Now I'm not going to initialize the square yet because I don't have the sprites set up, right? So when you run this, you get the grid. And here's the grid. I can change, it's not too bad. I could change a few things if I wanted to. I could, like I said, I could change the scale to maybe, let's say 0.75, and let's say increase to 0.2. So I could play around with that, where I want my grid to. Let's see how this looks. Oops, a little too close, right? I'm going to go to the scene, I'm going to take a look. Is the scale set for each one of them? Let's see. So if I go to block, look at the scale. Oh, I didn't change the scale. So I changed this value, but I didn't apply it. So I need to go, and I need to say go transform local, it's capital, local scale, and I say new vector 3 And I say scale, comma, scale. I think it's capitalized. Let's see if it catches me on the spelling here. Um, Local scale, maybe it's not capitalized. Let me try uncapitalized. Otherwise, I'll double check it. Let me go check this. Oh, okay, looks like I misspelled transform here. And also it's not a function, it's a field. So I have to make it equal. Okay, so let's give it a try. Now with those different values, and they're a little smaller and the gap is a little bigger. Okay, so what we said here is what I wanted to do is I wanted to click on, I wanted to click on these and I wanted to change the color or actually maybe even the image, right? So mouse events can be handled a couple of ways. I'm going to do a simple, one of the simple methods is to add some code to the block, and this is called the on mouse down. So when you click on the block, I'm just going to print its row and column. One thing though is for this click to work, it has the sprite or the prefab has to have um, the word is has to have a collider. So I'm going to put a collider on it and I'm going to make it a trigger. Okay. So now if I run it, actually I didn't update it. So I need to update this. I may change to this single one, but I need to update to all of them. There it goes. Okay, so now if I play and I click on start and I click on each one, you see, well, actually it's interesting. I didn't set the row and column yet, so I didn't initialize them, which is okay. But the mouse down is working, right? And now what I would like to do is maybe, let's say I want to generate, I mean, I could do a lot of different things, but I just want to generate a different color. Okay, didn't see that this was running. Here we go. So what I do is the sprite renderer has an option for color, and I just made a random color. This takes 3 RGB between 0 and 1 for some reason. So every time I click on it, it's going to give me a random color. Let's go test it out. So click on them, it'll give me a random color. Okay, this is pretty good, right? You can change the color anytime you like. The other thing that we'd like to do is sometimes work with images. What if I wanted to give this an image, and of course during a game something happens and I want to change the image. Okay, so here's how this is going to work. Here's my block prefab, right? But right now, I have this sprite on it. Remember the block that I made before? But I can add different sprites to it. So I have this button sprites, and I can go and I can get this sprite and I can put it on. See? It's a little smaller, so I have to watch the sizing, right? But I could add another one. And so if I just have different images, I can rotate through the different images. Okay, so I'm going to put those images on the level, which is not, sometimes where you put these images, it's up to you. It's going to be an interesting choice because every time you load the level, you're going to have to load the images. But in this case, I'm going to keep it simple. So I'm going to do it over here. So I'm going to say, okay, public, and this is sprite. This is going to be an array, and sprites. So now when I go to that level, project, and I go to that scene, is that to this other one? And I go to my level manager, you see it has now sprites. So let's put, 6. So I'm going to get 6 of these and I'll drag them in. So these will be my images. I got 6. Looks like maybe I missed one. Okay, I'll just reuse one. Okay, so now that I have these images, I'm going to rotate through the images, right? So every time you click the block, I'm going to rotate. So this could be done right here where you say set sprite, right? So it'll be, so I have to think about this a little bit. Do I want the level to do this? Do I want this object to do this? I'll just make the level do it, right? So I'm going to keep track of what sprite I'm on. So I'm going to say private index, right? So this will keep track of which sprite I'm on. And I'll say that to start, I'll say index equals 0. And then when you click the block, it's not going to, it's going to let, so on the mice down, I'm going to take this out. And I'm going to say, we'll call the level and let the level decide, right? So the level manager, I'm going to have a function called public void change sprite. You'll pass me the block. So which block? So the block is going to call this. And then I'm going to say block sprite sprite equals index. And once I do that, I'll increase index. I'll check if index is out of bounds greater than sprites dot length equal to greater or equal. So I don't want to go over. So I'll be rotating around, and then I'll say index equals back to 0. So the question now is, how do I get the block to call this function, right? Because you're going to be clicking on the block here, and I need to access on the level manager this function. Well, that's the reason, we made something, the singleton bit. Remember the singleton bit? By doing the singleton, you can access the level manager statically. So as you've seen before, every time you want the the game manager, you just say game manager capital dot instance, and you have it. It's static. So I'm going to do the same thing for the level. So I'm going to make it a singleton, right? So I can access it. So other objects can access it, I should say, right? So I'm going to do over here singleton, but it's get level manager instance, make singleton, everything here. This will, let's just say level manager instance, and then of course I have to call that. I'm going to do it in awake. Let me see how. Yeah, it's better done in awake. So this gives you an example of why, of how this uh, singleton bit works. So now that I have access to the level manager, I can go over here and I could, like I said, do it statically. Level manager.instance. I think it's change sprite. And now, here's another situation, is that this function needs the block. So I'm calling this function within the block that I need, right? Well, this is the block that I want to send. So how do I send him or itself? Well, you remember probably the word this. This refers to the object that you're on. So let me see if there are any errors here. There could be a couple of things popping up. It says level block does not contain a different sprite renderer. I didn't probably make that a getter and setter for that. So if I look at sprite renderer, I didn't make a getter and setter. So what I'll do is just make it private. Let me start it public. Okay, for now. So, and then this level manager can go and use the instance variable directly. Sprite renderer. Let's see if that goes away. Anything else? Okay, so let's see how this is going to work, right? So I'm at the block. I'm going to click on the block. I'm going to go to the level manager through the static instance, and I'm going to change the sprite. I'm going to rotate to the sprite. So now remember, if I click on a different block, it'll be a different sprite, and it's not on the same block that will rotate. It's just rotating through all the sprites, whatever the block is, right? So I need to go to my menu. See? So they're a little small, but they are changing. So I'm gonna have to make them a little bigger, right? So I'm gonna go to the scale. And let's say, let's make it 2. Let's see what happens. Okay, a little, of course, too big, but let's see. See, so the same one or different one, I'm rotating through the images. So you can change during gameplay in image. Interesting. Interesting, the spacing here. Let's see what the gap is. 0.2, something, oh, scale, 1. Try one more time. But anyway, the scaling you could always play around with. Yeah, something's up with the gap, and I think I know it has to do with the prefab, right? So you see what it is. It's collider is too big. I'm gonna reset the collider. Can I reset it? Okay, so maybe that'll help. But anyway, I'm gonna update. Try it one more time. Still a little too big, right? Anyway, we'll play around with that later. So that is how you place objects onto the stage or onto the scene and maybe start manipulating them.